Hello and welcome to another episode of my ability system series. In the last episode we set up a way of displaying our stats, which currently are only health and mana. And in this video we will start to add all the functions and variables that will handle the logic of our stat system. Before we do that, let's add another stat bar to our main widget and call that the EXP for experience bar. I forgot that in the last episode. Z order we will set to 1 and anchor that to the upper right corner. Then we'll set the alignment in X to 1 and reset the position in X to 0, as well as the position in Y to 0. Then we can move it down by, let's say, 20 pixels. Looks fine. And we will modify the bar color now. So experience usually something like an orange color with an alpha of 1, and the remove color we will do something like a bright yellow for that, also with an alpha of 1. Okay, then we can compile and close our main widget. Instead we will go back to our blueprints folder, and here we will add a new folder called enums. So what we are going to do here, we will do a slightly different setup for the stats as usual, because we will organize our stats using one of the new features in Unreal Engine 4.15, which are blueprint maps, and therefore we need a bit of setup before. So we will go into our enums folder and create a new blueprint enumeration that we will call e_stats. And here we'll basically do a list of all the stats that we have. But there's one thing that you should do in order to make working with a map easier, which is just to add an element being the default, and you can just call that null. So we will never use that, but it's much easier to work with a map if you have that kind of default value that you don't want to use anyways. Then we will add 3 new ones. First one will be health, then we will do mana, and finally experience. Once you've added all of your stats, save it and close the enum. We will create a new subfolder in our blueprints called structures now. Open that up and create a new blueprint structure called s_stat data. So in here we will keep track of all the variables associated with our individual stats, and we want to keep track of a min value, so our stat will never be below that value, that's an integer. Then a max value, also an integer, a current value, and then a displayed value. So you might be wondering why there is a displayed value if we already have a current one. But the thing is, if later we want to animate, we will directly set the current value and slowly decrease or increase the displayed value to animate that. So displayed value will be a float. Then we will have the min lerp time, also something for our animations later. And let's set the default to 0.2 seconds. Then, of course, we also need a maximum lerp time. And here the default will be 1.5 seconds. So basically that will just be the duration of our stat animation, meaning it will be somewhere in between 0.2 and 1.5, depending on how much of the stat is animated. So, for example, if we lose 200 HP, the animation will take longer than, for example, taking 25 HP damage. Alright. The next one is the bar widget, and that will be a bar w stat bar reference. Then we will add another one that's called currently animated question mark, just a boolean. We don't have to worry about that right now. Next one has regeneration question mark. So for example, we want to have mana regeneration, but our experience should better not have such a thing. Then we will need the time to reg for regenerate max value, which will be a float. And let's set the default to something like 45 seconds. And then we will need the reg interval, which we will set to 0.4. So every 0.4 seconds our regeneration timer will tick. And then we will also need the regeneration timer, which will just be a timer handle. Finally, there's only one variable left, which is the reg function name, and that will simply be a string. Alright, save that and close the s_stat data. We will add another structure here that we don't have to worry about in this episode, but just to have it done already. We will call that s_stat lerp, and it will have 3 variables. First one is called the original value, and that's the float. Next one will also be a float called the value to lerp2, and finally a boolean called positive ? Save it and close the s_stat lerp. Now we can go into our skill character, open that up, and first we want to add a variable here, which we will call stats. And now we want to use the new feature here, which is a map variable container. If you've never worked with maps so far, basically a container for variables that has 2 elements, a key and a value. A value can be any variable type and is associated with the key. Basically, like in an array, you have values that are always associated with an index, so that's just an integer as the key, but in the map you can have any other variable type being the key for that. So let me just show you how we can do that. First we want to select something like an integer as a variable type, just because you cannot create one using a boolean. That way we have to select another one. And here we can select the map, which is also called dictionary. And you will see that we have 2 values here. So the first one is the key, which in our case will be the e_stats, so the enum. And the next one will be the data, so s_stat data. Compile and save. And if we were to add an element here now, you will see that the key is null currently. We can select any other type. So the first one we will set to health, and we can expand that to see our values. Let's set the maximum value to 300, current value to 300, and displayed value to 300. The rest we can leave for now. Then we will add another stat here, being mana. And here we want to set the max value to something like 200, current value also 200, and displayed value 200. Then we will increase the minimum lerp time to 0.5 and maximum to 2.5. And finally, at the last stat, which is experience, maximum value will be 300, current and displayed value will all be 0, and lerp time, say 0.4 seconds to 2 seconds. Okay, save that. Now we have to create some functions to make working with a map more convenient for us. So the first one we will call getStat. It will have one input, which is the stat. So the type here is e_stats. It will have one output of the type s_stat data, which we will just call value or something like that, or data. And very important, we will have to check the pure boolean for this one. We can get our data by dragging in our stats map and then trying to find an element. Then connect the stats here, and we will plug in the return value for the data. Next function will be set stat value. It will have 2 inputs. First one is the stat, and the next one is the new value. Stat will be an e_stats, and the other one a data. drag in our stats array. It's kind of unintuitive, but to change a value you will have to call the add function here, and that will override it. Then connect the stat and the new value here. Afterwards return. Pile again. You might remember that in our stat data we have a reference to the stat bar, and currently those references are all invalid. So let's change that by adding a function called setup stat bars. And here what we want to do is get stat, and our stat will be health, so we start with health. Then we want to drag off of the data here and set members in s_stat data. That way you can change individual variables of the structure without having to touch the other ones. Let's just connect that, and we will right click, restore all structure pins, so you will see those. Then we'll go to a bar widget, right click and remove all other pins, so now we only see a bar widget. Then drag in the main widget and get the health bar, and afterwards we want to set stat value. Again, this will be health, and the new value will be what's returned from our set members call. Alright, thing is that we have to do exactly the same thing with mana and experience, so just copy those over, and we will again get stat, but this time it will be mana. Connect that to the struct ref here, and instead of using the health bar we will get the mana bar. Connect that up here, and here also change the stat to mana. Copy, paste it once more, change that to be experience, get stat, experience, connect that to the struct ref, and get the exp bar off of the main widget, connect that to the bar widget, and that should be it. Then we will return, file and save. Another function we will need is update stat to show any modifications to a stat in our widget. It will have one input, which is stat to update, and what we will do is get that stat, then break the data, and here we will expand the default category and uncheck everything but the bar widget, the displayed value and the maximum value. Then we want to check whether the bar widget is valid, so check, connect the execution up here. If it's not valid we can just return without doing anything, but if it is valid, what we can do is get our bar widget here, then get the stat bar and set %, and to calculate the % we will get the displayed value, divide that by our maximum value, which will be converted to a float, and just to make sure we will clamp that from 1 to 0. Plug that in for the %. Also, off of our bar widget we want to get the stat text, and then set text. For our in text we will use a format, and this will be in curly brackets displayed, then add a blank space, slash, another blank space, and then maximum again in brackets. The displayed will be our displayed value that we will truncate and then convert to text int. Uncheck the use grouping, plug that in for the displayed, and maximum will just be the max value to text. Again, we don't want it to group. Also, one thing that I would like to show you very quickly is something that you can see in many games, is that when you lose health, the health bar changes its color slowly from green to red to indicate that player is in danger. And if we want to do that, we can drag off of our stat, search for double equal, check whether that's health, and add a branch. If it's false, we will just return without doing anything. But if not, we can get our stat bar, set fill color and opacity. For the in color, we will search for lerp using HSV. And then off of our bar widget, let's get the bar color, because that will be our B. The A will just be something like a dark red. And the alpha will come from our clamp node. Okay, after that, return. Then we will go to our event graph, to event begin play, and let's add some space before we add the main widget to the viewport. First, we want to set up our stat bars, and then we want to call update stat for health, copy paste it twice for mana and experience, and we will line those up. And after we updated all the stats, we can add the main widget to the viewport. Apply and save. Then there's one essential function left that we need to create, which is modify stat. It will have 3 inputs. First one being the stat, which is an eStats. Then by, so the value we want to modify it by, and also a boolean called animated, which we won't do in this episode but in the next one. So first off, let's promote all of that to local variables, so local stat, then local by, and local animated. After that, we will add a branch for our animated. If it's true, currently don't do anything. But if it's false, we want to get stat off of the local stat, and we want to set members again. Let's restore all structure pins, and we can remove every structure pin except for current value and displayed value. So let me quickly do this. Bar widget, currently animated, regeneration, this one, and finally the name here. For the current value, we will have to break our stat here. We will only show the minimum, max, and current value. The rest we don't need here. So current value will be our current value plus the local by clamped from the minimum value to the maximum value. Plug that in for the current value here, as well as for the displayed value, because if we don't want to animate it, they will be exactly the same. Then get the local stat, set stat value to the output here. And finally, off of local stat, we will call update stat. Then we can return. And let's quickly copy over the return node to our true path, compile and save. If we head over to the event graph, let's add a comment box. Event begin play, set up the stat bars, and update stats. Give that some kind of color here. And then we will search for num plus and num minus, because we will use those two to test whether our functions are working. So if we hit plus, we will modify stat. Stat will be health. We will modify that by 50. Animated is false. Copy that for num minus. We will modify it by minus 50. Compile and save this. Then if we were to hit play, first thing you can see is that our experience bar is also appearing here. It's not filled right now, which is correct. The current and maximum values are displayed properly. If I were to hit minus, you will see that 50 was removed, so we're at 250. And if I do that, you can slowly see how the color changes to red. Currently the transition is quite hard, but we will change that when our stats are animated. So that's working, and I can just choose mana as the stat to be modified here, see whether that's also working. So if I hit minus, that's working fine as well. Okay, that's it for the basic setup of our stats. In the next episode, we will add some cool extra features, for example, regeneration and the animation of all of our stats. Alright, see you in the next episode.